Hey everyone, this is Sportsman Pariente, and after a very interesting end to the divisional round, we are now down to the final four. Tomorrow is Championship Sunday, and in the AFC Championship game, we'll have the Kansas City Chiefs traveling to Baltimore to take on the top-seeded Baltimore Ravens. And in the NFC, the Detroit Lions will travel to San Francisco to take on the top seed in the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers. So let's jump right in and start breaking down these matchups. Now, the Chiefs had a thrilling win in Buffalo last week, 27-24 over the Buffalo Bills. The game, of course, ending with Josh Allen throwing two incompletions when he might have had a touchdown, and then Tyler Bass missing his kick wide right. Shades of Scott Norwood in the Super Bowl for Bills fans who are familiar with more playoff heartbreak, but I digress. And of course, the Ravens had a huge victory over the Texans last week, 34-10. Yes, 34-10. And the Ravens ran for over 200 yards. Lamar threw for almost 200, and it was just a dominant performance by Lamar Jackson at home. And for the Chiefs, it was a dominant performance by Patrick Mahomes on the road in his first playoff game. And the Chiefs' offense looked arguably the best they've looked all season. Now, what is this game going to come down to? Well, again, can the Chiefs' offense do what they did last week with Pacheco running the ball for over 100 yards, Mahomes throwing, I think, only 5 incompletions, multiple touchdowns. Kelsey had 2 touchdowns last week. They were able to get Marquez Valdes-Scantling had some big catches. The Chiefs were able to move the ball up and down the field consistently. Outside of 2 red zone drives in the first quarter where they settled for field goals, the Chiefs were able to get the touchdowns that have been an issue with them for most of the season where they've struggled in the red zone. But in fairness, the Bills' defense was very banged up with injuries. The Ravens' defense, of course, is the top defense in the NFL with Jadeveon Clowney. It's not clear if Marlon Humphreys, one of their best safeties, will play in this game. He didn't play against the Texans last week. But this is going to be the biggest test for Kansas City, arguably this season. This is arguably the best defense in the NFL. We saw what the Ravens did last week against the Texans. The Texans' offense only put up 3 points, taking away the punt return touchdown. They were able to get pressure on C.J. Stroud. He was forced to make a lot of incompletions, throw the ball before he was ready. If the Chiefs' O-line can hold up, and there are some injuries on the Chiefs' O-line, I believe Tooney, one of their top guards, will not play tomorrow. So if the Ravens' front line can get pressure on Mahomes and force him into either incompletions or make life very difficult for him, that could be an issue for the Chiefs on the offensive side. Now, the Chiefs' defense has been a very good strength for them this season. It's been arguably the best part of their team. There were some cracks, though, last week. Now, the Bills were moving the ball very well for most of the game, up and down the field. They had, I believe, 3 drives of 75 yards or more where they scored touchdowns, and they controlled the clock for almost 40 minutes. But the bottom line is the Bills on offense ran the ball for over 182 yards. Josh Allen had 72 yards on the ground, James Cook had 61, Ty Johnson 40, and so on and so forth. Now, the Ravens last week ran for over 200 yards against the Houston Texans. And if Lamar can do what he did last week, where he ran the ball for almost 100 yards, threw for almost 200, if Gus Edwards can have a decent game, if Dalvin Cook gets involved, if Justice Hill gets involved, if the Ravens can run the ball like they did last week, they can control the clock, keep Mahomes and the Chiefs offense off the field, and make life very difficult for the Chiefs defense. We saw them have issues last week against the run. This does not bode well against the Ravens. The Ravens love to run the ball, and they're very good at that. And also keep in mind the Ravens will have Mark Andrews back in this game. He returned to practice a few weeks ago. He is cleared to play. It's not clear, obviously, how many snaps he'll have. I don't expect him to play the full game. I don't think that's going to happen. But even with limited snaps, Mark Andrews can attack the middle of the field. He can also be utilized on the O-line to help block for the Ravens running game. So if the Chiefs fall behind early, that's an issue because the Ravens can keep attacking them, can get the defense tired. The Chiefs' offense really has to keep the game close in order for the Chiefs to really have a chance to win this game. They have to keep it close because if the Ravens can play with the lead and run the ball, it's going to be very difficult to stop them. Now, Baltimore on offense, even taking away the running game, you have Zay Flowers, who's had an amazing year. Isaiah Likely has really stepped up after the Andrews injury. Odell Beckham can still make plays down the field. They have a lot of weapons. Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar. Obviously, they have maybe the best kicker in football in Justin Tucker. I mean, this Ravens team is loaded. And we saw what they did to the 49ers a few weeks ago in San Fran. We've seen the Ravens beat some very good teams this season. They're no fluke, I can assure you of that. And in Baltimore with that crowd, we saw the Texans, I think, have 5 or 6 pre-snap penalties because of the crowd noise. Will the Chiefs be able to handle that part of the game as well? So, ironically, much like last week when Sean McDermott faced off against Andy Reid, McDermott, of course, the Bills head coach, McDermott used to work under Andy Reid, much like John Harbaugh, who's the Ravens head coach, also used to work under Andy Reid in Philadelphia. So it seems these playoffs we're seeing Andy Reid face off against some of his proteges. So can John Harbaugh outcoach Andy Reid in this game? Absolutely he could. And I think the Ravens overall have a better team than the Chiefs based on their success this year on defense and on offense and on special teams, whereas the Chiefs, as we all know, have had issues on offense this year, and their defense, while it's been very good this year, we did start to see some cracks in the armor last week against the Bills. So my prediction for this game is, even though the Chiefs played great last week, Mahomes looked great in his first road game, I think all the momentum right now and the way Baltimore has looked this season and how they played last week, I think this is Baltimore's game to win or lose, and I think Lamar Jackson will continue his MVP season and continue to change the narrative on his legacy and get to the Super Bowl. So my opinion is Baltimore will represent the AFC when they beat the Chiefs tomorrow. I think this will be a bit of a high-scoring affair, but my prediction is Baltimore 31, Chiefs 27. Now that brings us to the main event on Championship Sunday, and that is the San Francisco 49ers hosting arguably the team that's been maybe the biggest feel-good story in the NFL this season, the Detroit Lions. Now, the Lions, as we all know their history, and back in 2008, they went 0-16. They hadn't won a division title since 1993 until this season. They hadn't won a playoff game since 1991. They have never made the Super Bowl in the modern era. But in this postseason alone, they've won 2 playoff games over the LA Rams, and of course last week they beat the Tampa Bay Bucks 31-23. And the 49ers, as we all know, last week barely escaped the Green Bay Packers in an incredible game that the 49ers really struggled in offensively. And defensively, they were struggling until the final 3 drives where they were able to make Jordan Love throw 2 picks, get pressure on him, and all that. And also Andrews Carlson missing a 41-yard field goal with 6 minutes left. But the 49ers got very lucky last week. Now, Debo did get hurt in the beginning of the game and did not return. As of yesterday, according to NFL.com, Debo Samuel has been cleared to play, which is very good news for the 49ers on offense. So, offensively, can the 49ers attack this Detroit defense? Yes, Detroit's defense, while it's been good this year, is not their strength. We saw them struggle against the Rams with Nakua and Cooper Kupp going off against their secondary. We saw Mike Evans and Godwin have very good games. Baker threw for over 300 yards. So if Debo is healthy, and obviously if McCaffrey can play like he did last week, if Kittle can get involved, if you can get Ayuk more involved, the 49ers on offense, depending on the weather, of course, and if Purdy can improve on some of the struggles he had last week and kind of in the end of the season where he was struggling with picks and things like that. If Purdy can play with confidence, the 49ers can really go off against Detroit on the defensive side of the ball. Now, for the Lions on offense, obviously the story has been Jared Goff's phenomenal postseason so far. Amon St. Brown, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. The 49ers on defense, they're not as good as they've been in previous seasons. We saw what the Packers did to them last week in the first half. They left a lot of points on the board with field goals and the 4th down missed conversion in the red zone in the first half. But Aaron Jones ran for over 100 yards. Jordan Love, before the final 3 drives, was carving up that defense left and right. So if Goff, Montgomery, and Gibbs can do well, and if the running game for Detroit can show up, the Niners defense does have some loose ends there that can be exploited. And we saw Dobbs and Jaden Reed, Christian Watson make some plays last week against the Niners secondary. Again, granted, the weather was not at its best, and the Niners apparently were struggling with their footing because of their cleats, but the Detroit offense can certainly put up points on the 49ers, and if Goff can play clean and limit the turnovers, it could be a very interesting matchup between Brian Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, and Steve Wilkes, who's the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. And Dan Campbell, the job he's done alone in the past 2 seasons in Detroit, in my opinion, is absolutely worthy of Coach of the Year along with DeMeco Ryans. He's done a phenomenal job taking Jared Goff, who was basically thrown out of Los Angeles by Sean McVay because he didn't think Goff could lead them to a Super Bowl. Well, we can go into that more, but here is Jared Goff on the verge of bringing the Detroit Lions to the Super Bowl with all the weapons he has around him, with the running game, with the confidence that he's shown over the last year and a half, 2 seasons under Dan Campbell. This Lions team is a force to be reckoned with, and this is going to be, I think, an amazing game. And I think it also, like all of Detroit's playoff games this year, is going to come down to the wire. But this is a huge game for San Francisco. This is their 4th conference championship game in the last 5 years. They've had the victory in 2019 over Green Bay. They lost last year to the Eagles, of course, when Purdy got hurt, Josh Johnson got hurt, and they had no quarterbacks, basically, to throw the ball. They had the really brutal loss in 2021 at Los Angeles, where they were up 10 in the 4th quarter and lost that conference championship game. This is a huge game for Kyle Shanahan. Before last week, he was 0-30 in games where his teams were down by 7 points going into the 4th quarter. They finally broke that streak last week. We all know Kyle Shanahan's history of blowing 4th quarter leads in The Super Bowl, of course, when he was the offensive coordinator in Atlanta, they were up 28-3 in Super Bowl 51 and lost to the Patriots. They had a 10-point lead in Super Bowl 54 against the Chiefs, and they lost that game. They had a 10-point lead in the 2021 NFC title game against the Rams and lost that. If they don't win this game, I don't know how much longer the 49ers can keep this core together, because McCaffrey's not getting any younger, Debo's getting older, Kittle is getting older. They're going to have to pay Brock Purdy at some point. I don't know how much longer the Niners can keep this together. So this is a very huge game for them to get to the Super Bowl. All the pressure is on them. The pressure is not on the Lions, because no one thought they would be in this position, maybe outside of Dan Campbell and his coaching staff. But I believe that the Lions, the way they've been playing and the way the Niners have kind of struggled last week and in the other games against Baltimore and some other teams in adverse conditions, this Detroit team is tough, they play hard, and I believe we are going to see an amazing victory tomorrow, and the Detroit Lions are going to make history and get to their first Super Bowl in the modern era. Stay tuned, and please continue to subscribe to my channel, and let's hope for some great games tomorrow.